Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Christopher Aaron, and I spent 5 years working for the intelligence community as a whole during the mid to late 2000s, and 2 of those years was at the CIA for their drone program. I deployed twice to Afghanistan and Iraq from 2006 through 2009 in support of the drone program and some other programs in the intelligence community. Before I go any further, though, I want to say thank you to Sean, Stephen, Brandon, and Michael, because if they hadn't spoken out over the last few years, I wouldn't be here yet. So they have paved the road for this. So in the drone program, our responsibility was to kill or capture senior Taliban and Al-Qaeda members. And we used the drones as our primary intelligence tool to do that. We worked very closely with the military and with the special operations. It's a very fuzzy line between the two. I remember very clearly one of our first successes, it was in 2006, when after following him for several months with the drones, we then dropped a 500-pound bomb on Abu al-Zakari. And I remember very clearly, after we had killed him, there was this air of celebration in the agency, as if back then in late 2006, as if we were making all this progress and things were really coming together. I believe he was somewhere near second in command at that time of Al-Qaeda. And throughout my time and then in my deployment, and especially then 3 years later in my second deployment, I began to see with my own eyes that what I was being told was very far from what I was actually experiencing. So I was having these two diverse set of experiences. And I came to a conclusion, which was that we cannot change ideological radicals by dropping bombs on them. It just does not work. I began to see a real lack of foresight, both in the CIA and at the military at large, as to the consequences of a lot of the bombings that we were supporting and the Hellfire missiles that we were shooting. Just as an example, we would often target senior Taliban leaders who would be associated with these madrasas, which are these religious schools in Afghanistan. And so the leader, the teacher of a school, would have a group of 10 to 15 young boys between about 8 and 13 years old, and you could tell that they were teaching them because we would observe them with the predators, and they would be sitting out in the field. They would teach outside as if they were going for a field trip. The teacher would sit in the middle, and the boys would sit outside in a circle, and we would follow this individual for anywhere from a few hours to a few months, and then we would shoot a missile at him. And when you're really drinking the Kool-Aid, the government Kool-Aid, it's very easy to get caught up in that groupthink. But when you step away, and it was really for me, it took me after I decided to leave the intelligence community, it took me about a year to actually start to process what I had participated in and to see that we were really causing more harm than good over the long run. I mean, if you can imagine from the perspective of these young boys, they're being told, they're being taught that we are at war with the United States, we're at war with the West. and suddenly their teacher is blown up either in front of them or while they're sleeping at night. And so suddenly the prophecy has come true. So everything is true that they're being taught. And we are absolutely, as Sean said, sowing the seeds for the next round of people to hate us, the next round of terrorists, as we call them, within the intelligence community. But really, the next round of people that are just living their own lives on the other side of this planet in a vastly different way than we are living, but still just people. We had a horrible joke that we called, we were playing the game Whack-A-Mole, which if you're a child from the 80s or 90s, you'll know that game from the arcade. You take this big hammer and you smash a mole down and another one comes up. And that's exactly what it was like going to work every day. How many of these people did we kill? And then the next day, oh, here's all these new targets. It was sick. These are some of the strategic errors that I observed. There were a lot of operational errors as well. The decentralization that Sean was talking about is absolutely true, and it goes so much further. The turnover amongst participants in the war, you constantly have new people coming in every few weeks to every few months, sometimes with only 24 hours continuity between people. So if there was one person who was an expert on a target, when the new person comes in, suddenly all that information is gone. Why? Because we lacked a central database. Can you imagine it? To keep all of our targets organized. So someone new comes in, and for all they know, there's a bunch of chicken running around on the ground as opposed to a bunch of children. So there was absolutely a lot of guesswork involved. Yes, of course, we killed a lot of the senior Taliban, a lot of the Al-Qaeda targets that we were going after. I'm not here to say that there are no successes to the program if you want to define those successes as killing the targets that the military and the political leaders are setting out. We do, and we have killed many of them, but we have also killed many innocent civilians. And I believe the question is that cost worth it? And I decided for myself that it wasn't worth it after a number of years, that I did not want to spend the rest of my life and look back and say that what I dedicated myself toward was to kill people on the other side of the planet who I didn't know ultimately. So again, it's like there were these two sets of experiences that I was having, what I was being told and then what I was observing. From 2006 to my second deployment in 2009, I observed more suicide attacks on the base, more mortars being shot into the base, gunfire going off at night, both in Iraq and Afghanistan, and losses of control of the country, such as around Kandahar and some of the eastern provinces in Afghanistan along the border with Pakistan. And so we were making things worse, not better, and the only conclusion that I could come to was that we are essentially setting ourselves up for what we would have to call a perpetual war. This is a war with no clearly defined goal, where we continue by shooting and dropping bombs on people to sow the seeds for the next year's war. Until when? I don't know. I don't have the answer for that. Most of my work was based at Langley at the CIA headquarters for the drone program, and then in the bases in Afghanistan and Iraq. But I did have a little bit of exposure to the human side of what I was participating in. Not quite as much as Sean, but For example, we would fly our airplanes into some of these outlying bases, and you observe the children. There's that theme again. You would observe the children as we would fly into these bases. They would be running alongside the plane, and they would be waving and shouting and waving scarves and things like that. And you could just see it was that same excitement about seeing an airplane that children anywhere in the world would see. And it was like they weren't yet aware that we were perhaps blowing up other people in their village. But for them, they were excited just to see the airplane. So I think this theme of perpetual war is where I have arrived at. And this is the theme that I first got from Orwell. If you reread 1984, a lot of us had to read it in high school. But if you reread 1984, he really talks about this, how governments will perpetually be fighting one another. And it doesn't so much matter who we're fighting against, but just to keep the conflict going in one direction or another. So, in closing, I know this gets pretty dark, and there's a lot of darkness in this, absolutely. But I take something from, again, going back perhaps to high school, which is when you learn in science class that darkness is merely the absence of light. And so I believe, obviously because I'm here, I believe that we do have the opportunity by exposing this policy of perpetual war, by sharing compassion with the victims, and perhaps a hint of forgiveness somewhere in there. I believe we do have a chance to shine some light through this darkness. Thank you.